you need to also capture their heart a little bit, right? You need to make them feel something. It doesn't have to be like fear, or, it doesn't have to be immediately love or something. It can be just curiosity. It could be mild amusement, right? It could be, oh, I'm having an aha moment. I didn't know that before, right? It could be surprise. It can be anything, but you're not going to get to that if all you know about somebody is what keywords they've looked up, their age, and maybe their gender, right? And maybe their function, right? It's not enough.
This is the Inbound4Cast, a podcast series about inbound marketing and organic growth for B2B companies. Here's your host, Gerald Arcus.
Mariya, welcome to my podcast.
I took a sip of water at the wrong time. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this for 3 months now that we've scheduled it. My husband's like, "Have you had that podcast yet?" I'm like, "No, not that one." Right? I'm recording another one. He's like, "Is that the one you scheduled ages ago?" I'm like, "No, not yet. No, it's not time. We're not ready."
Me too. I think you have an interesting point of view on B2B marketing. You are doing something different than most of maybe almost everybody I talk to. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of our thing. I feel like we've become the people that do things differently in B2B marketing. I hope it doesn't become that for the sake of itself, because I think that's not productive. But so far, it's just kind of been what keeps happening, right? Not intentionally, but yeah, I would say we're often against the grain.
But I like that. I like people who think differently.
Me too.
Before we start, I want to thank Play Forward. They are creating the vertical videos for my podcast. And before we start the conversation, maybe it's good to first mention the topic. I think the main topic of this episode will be understanding your audience, but also creating superfans and using them in your own marketing, right? But before we start, can you give an introduction of yourself and share one thing that most people don't know about you?
Okay. So my name is Mariya Delano. I'm the founder and CEO of Kalina Marketing, which is a boutique B2B marketing agency for mostly tech brands, where we help our clients create superfans, grow through organic marketing, make better content, develop a unique point of view. And our services tend to range between content strategy, content creation, content distribution, and PR. And we have a little bonus service called SparkToro Consulting, where we help people with the software that a lot of marketers honestly don't know how to leverage properly. One thing that people wouldn't know about me would be, so a lot of people have been telling me to write a book recently because I write really, really long blog posts and really long newsletters, and I do it a lot. So they're seeing like the volume of content that I'm putting out, and they're like, "You should write a book." But what they don't know is I already did. I wrote a book, and it was published when I was 12 years old.
Whoa.
In my native Ukraine. And it was a fantasy novel about a girl from Ukraine who moves to the Philippines and discovers that she has magic powers.
That's nice. I haven't heard that one before as an answer to this question.
Yeah, I feel like not that many people could say that.
No, and at a very young age also.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. Because I was so young, people were fixating on it a little bit. So, I ended up on TV and things like that, which was great. But also, I remember everyone kept talking about my age, and it started getting to me. So I decided, you know what? I'm not writing any more books until I'm an adult. So I guess I've been an adult for a second, so maybe I should get back to that. But for a while there, I didn't like that. I didn't like how much everybody fixated on my age over everything else.
Yeah.
Like over what the book was about or any of the merits of it or the writing, right? It was frustrating, actually, but also pretty cool.
But maybe your book is then almost finished if you have written all of these long format pieces of content.
I've been thinking about it. My business coach has actually been telling me to go look for a book agent. I don't know. I haven't taken it that seriously yet, but we'll see. Maybe one day.
Yeah,
maybe
indeed.
This will become the early pre-announcement.
Yeah, and you're based in New York right now, right?
Yes, I'm based in New York State, currently in Ithaca, but we're moving to New York City in a couple of months.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
let me. Oh, this is. I have normally I don't have this much notes, so when I'm
Ooh,
trying to read it, there's a lot of text. Where do I start?
at
Well,
the end.
I
No,
think
just kidding.
I think the beginning, when I also check your website, there's a lot about understanding your audience, right?
Yes.
Can you share some information about that? So, how do you approach it? Why is it that important?
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a, I don't know, uh, grievance, let's say, with a lot of the way that B2B marketers approach research, and especially research on their customers, research on their audiences. I remember pretty early into like having our blog, one of the first blog posts we have is a guest writer who was talking about how much he hated using ClearScope. And how he felt like it drained his writing of everything that was actually interesting or unique about it. And the reason I wanted that piece on there is this long-standing grievance where I feel like so many marketers depend on these tools and depend on this kind of shallow analysis that they don't supplement with anything else, right? There's nothing wrong with something like ClearScope or Surfer in and of itself. What's wrong with it is when you don't do anything else, right? When you feel like all you need to do to make content and to rank and to get it distributed is to see what keywords somebody's looking up, right? And that's it, right? What
Yeah,
keywords do they look for on Google? Maybe we're going to make up a demographic for them. Maybe, if we're lucky, we know what function they're in. So we're going to say our audience are, I don't know, data analysts working in enterprise companies who are men in their 30s to 50s, and they look up the keyword at SQL or SQL analyst on Google, right?
yep,
And that's it. And the problem with that is if you're making content, right? It's not all that different to any other kind of communication or a lot of other kinds of written media, right? You're competing essentially with every other kind of written content on the internet, which might not be marketing, might not be B2B. And for most of that stuff, people do know that you need to actually resonate, right? You need to actually capture not just the eyeballs of somebody, but to maintain those eyeballs, right? And to get something out of it as well, you need to also capture their heart a little bit, right? You
yeah.
need to make them feel something. It doesn't have to be like fear or, it doesn't have to be immediately love or something. It can be just curiosity. It could be mild amusement, right? It could be, oh, I'm having an aha moment. I didn't know that before, right? It could be surprise. It can be anything, but you're not going to get to that if all you know about somebody is what keywords they've looked up, their age, and maybe their gender, right? And maybe their function, right? It's not enough.
Maybe it was. I agree. Maybe 10 years ago it was in a lot of cases enough
Yeah.
because there was less content.
Exactly. And I feel like so many companies and so many marketers and so much advice actually is stuck in 2015 at best, right? Worse yet is when it's like 2010. I've seen advice that sounds like it's from 2003, but that's a whole other can of worms. Most of it, I would say, is stuck around 2015, 2016. And the world of content has moved a lot. The world of SEO has moved a lot. And it's been moving in front of our eyes too, right? I mean, we've had the helpful content update come out, what, a year ago?
Yeah,
2 years ago?
I
It's
think
been very
September.
recent.
Yeah,
And it just finished fully rolling out, right? And then there was the spam update, now there's SGE, and all of this stuff is extremely new. And people have not adapted to it. I feel like everyone's ignoring it. I remember very distinctly when the helpful content update first came out, I was talking to one of my clients at the time, and I actually didn't really know SEO yet. I was talking to one of my clients. We were doing the content writing and research, and they were doing the SEO part. So we were partnering with them. And I was like, oh, you guys are the SEO experts. What do you think about this update? Because I read about this and this seems like it's going to affect everything. And like, we don't really care. We don't see how it's going to affect our work because we haven't seen it affect our work yet. And that was the day I decided to learn SEO.
and which update was that? Did you say?
This was the helpful content update, the original version of it.
The one from
Yeah.
last year.
August last
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that was the day I decided I need to go learn SEO because I don't think these people know what they're doing.
Yeah, maybe you can say the impact wasn't that big, but I think it should. Well, you should have maybe some kind of mind shift. You should look different at SEO, and some people already did that, but
Yeah.
not enough, not enough people.
Yeah, like it wasn't necessarily about this update's already having a huge impact. Like since then it has, right? Of course, we've seen ripple effects and it's been updated more and more and more. But beyond that, it was the attitude that bothered me, right? It's like there's a core update that Google issued. They have all of this guidance now that just came out. A lot of SEO experts are also talking about this, but companies are looking at that and going, but that is work.
But
That
then,
means changing
may
things.
I ask you what your background is? Because
Yeah.
uh, that's about a year ago when you started looking into
Hmm.
SEO, but you have written a content piece for Search Engine Land in the meantime.
Yeah.
And I think you were at Moscon, or was it another event?
No, I was not at MosCon. I actually applied, but back then I didn't have that much conference experience yet and I didn't have a media page. I'm going to apply again,
You
probably.
were at a big
But
event. I don't know which one it was.
yes, I've been to B2B. SMX was the one I spoke at recently. Before that, I was at SAS Open, and next I'm going to Hot Sauce. So I've been to a bunch of events, but none of them have been SEO centric yet, actually.
Yeah, but what were you doing
Yeah.
before SEO then? Just
Yeah.
B2B marketing and content, or something else?
So I have a weird background. I've actually not been in marketing in general for that long. I've been in marketing for 3.5 years. Before that, I was mostly a writer and a researcher. I was doing a degree in literature and literary analysis, so focused very much on the theory and analysis side with a partially specialization in creative writing. But more importantly than that, I spent a lot of college working for 3 years in the writing center of my university. And it was a very intense program. Even though it was a part time campus job, it was known as the job you do not take if you just want a normal campus job and some money, because they will actually work you to the bone, right? We had this huge training program. Basically, when they hired you the first semester, you weren't even allowed to like actually have a consultation with anybody. They would train us for a whole semester, and then afterwards we would spend days and days and days training, right? So we were us qualified as the full-time writing instructors essentially, and we were held to the same standards. And that meant that we were applying that every time somebody came in, right? We had all of this training in pedagogy, in writing theory, argumentation, asking questions, what makes a good paper, right? And it had to be very subject agnostic, because people would come in, right? Somebody would book a consultation for an hour. They would come in. You weren't able to see their paper beforehand. You had no idea what they were bringing. Often it was on a subject you had never taken. It might have been a field that you've never even interacted with, right?
Yeah.
Like there were fields that I knew nothing about constantly coming in. We had PhD students come in sometimes. I've had professors come in asking for help with like their presentations, their academic papers, right? And I did, I think, definitely more than 100 of those consultations in the 3 years. I think it was closer to 200. And when you do enough of those things, honestly, a lot of the marketing work seems easier. It's easier to learn.
Yeah.
It's easier to adapt to, because you just have these kinds of core skill sets, right? That marketing demands often, and especially content work. So that made it a lot easier for me to learn, and I picked it up pretty quickly. And then for SEO, the other thing that helped me is I also have a bit of a technical mindset, because before I switched to being a literature major, I spent 2 years wanting to be a physicist. So I've taken a ton of, physics, math. I've taken computer science classes. I've taken a ton of these kinds of more technical working with data. I've had to analyze data for papers with professors. So everything was kind of already there, right? I had this just foundation of skills across the board. And that was just applying those skills to a new context.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where were we in the story about
Mm.
understanding the audience?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what does your process look like to do that?
Yeah. So our process right now depends a lot on a tool called SparkToro. And when we can't find something in SparkToro, that's when we have to get creative, and we do other things as well. But essentially, when we start out with a client, we start out by first having a bit of a kickoff call where a lot of what we're trying to understand is, what do they think they're doing? Like, who do they think they're writing for? What is their understanding of an audience or their audience? Because a lot of them will tell you that they know their audience, right? But then our understanding is not aligned, right?
Yep.
It might often be that SEO tool. It might often be these are the customers that have come in, and maybe we have transcripts from sales. It might be this is what we're assuming about this kind of buyer based on every other company and based on what content our competitors are putting out. But nobody questioned if that's the right kind of content, if anybody even reads it right. They say, our competitor's blog looks like this. And then you dig in and you find out that nobody actually reads that competitor's blog, right? And that's happened enough times that we kind of assume that they're probably wrong about a lot of what they say, but we try to get a sense of it anyway. And then that also gives us a sense of who are we looking for, at least vaguely.
Can you maybe
Mhm.
give a summary of what SparkToro does? Because I think a lot of my
Yes.
listeners know Rand Fishkin,
Yeah.
and I think most of them even know SparkToro, but
Yeah.
mainly because of the blog and
Yeah.
because of Rand, um, and maybe also because I checked it a few years ago when it started, and then I think you couldn't use it for the Dutch market. So I don't think a lot of people in the Netherlands know what you can do with it.
Yes. Basically, SparkToro is it's amazing. You have a search box, and instead of searching for people who look for a particular keyword, like you can, but what you do is you say my audience does this basically, and you have a couple of options for how to search for them. My audience goes on this website a lot, right? So you would give them a website. My audience follows the social media account, so you give them a handle of a social media account. My audience might describe themselves with this word or phrase within their bio. So this is what they say in their profile about themselves, right? My audience uses these words in their posts on social media. Or I think that's basically it for the kinds of searches that you can do, but it helps you define them. Oh, my audience uses this hashtag in their social media posts,
Yep.
but it's based on what they actively do, right? On their social media, publicly, how do they put themselves forward? What is the kind of activity that they have, right? Who do they follow? What do they interact with? And what do they post? Which fundamentally is very different to what somebody privately would be looking up on a search engine, because this is how they're presenting themselves, right? This is how they interact with the world publicly. And if it's a B2B buyer, right, it's how they interact professionally. What is it that makes them want to share it, right? In
Yep.
terms of content, what are they sharing with their colleagues, with their peers, with people they're trying to impress, with their boss, right? Because these accounts often do get followed and looked by people that somebody works with, right?
Yep.
And it's just fundamentally such a different kind of data that it's so much easier to start getting a picture of what do people actually care about, right? What are they paying attention to? What are they like really, really resonating with? What is on their mind a lot? What questions keep coming up? How do they think about themselves, right? I love looking at that words people use in their bios field, for example, because it tells you how people describe themselves.
And then you're talking
Yesterday,
about LinkedIn,
yeah,
Twitter, platforms like
yes.
that. Reddit, I think,
Yes.
is a new
Yes,
one.
Reddit is in there. Then you also have podcasts that people listen to. You get results on YouTube channels, press that they read. It's split up in many, many different ways. And I know that they are having a version 2 come out very soon, which will have even more data. It will actually combine it with search data too. So this is what these people look up on search. And also you can see people who look up this keyword on search, this is what else they do and what they actually do on their public profiles. And I know that they're also adding what apps they use. And I think there's going to be a couple more things as well. But it's just a bunch of it's like a list of things that somebody does online, right? Essentially,
Yep.
just summed up for you and aggregated across a group. And it is such a quick window to the soul in many ways. It's really cool. Yesterday, I was looking it up and for a client, and we were looking at people who use the hashtag freelancer, and you would see words in bio had things like aspiring, or they had words like, I think there was a nerd or geek. I see that one a lot, right? Or even you see something like formerly is a very common word. That means people are constantly putting their previous position in.
So you're
That means
scanning
there might,
for IDs, for tone of voice, for
yeah,
people, for platforms.
yeah. Yeah, I'm almost trying to get their psychological profile in many ways, right? The two things I'm looking for are what are these people like? And also where are they, right? Because a lot of the things that we look for is where can we find them? You often can't trust like the obvious answers Because you might think that somebody goes on the sites that everybody would list out in top 5 sites for, I don't know, data analysts, right? To continue with our example. That often doesn't actually match up at all, right? It will be the top 5 biggest corporations.
Yep.
It might be the 5 that rank in search the most, but it doesn't actually mean that's where people go. It doesn't mean that's what people read. It doesn't mean that's what people share. And a lot of our clients, what they actually want is not just to rank, but rank with the right people, right? And also have their content distributed elsewhere, right? Because often if people are sharing it, it helps with SEO as well, and it helps with all the other distribution engines. And one of my firm beliefs, honestly, is that SEO should not be a silo, right? I think SEO works best as a distribution channel in combination with everything else. And it should be all working together alongside each other. All of your marketing investments and all of your content, especially, should kind of be, connected to each other, right? Your
Yeah.
SEO should be reinforcing everything else you're doing.
I often say SEO is mostly a consequence of doing good marketing.
Yes, yes, and that's like what we do often. In fact, I kind of laugh about it. My articles, for example, for Search Engine Land, they don't get edited that much. I've published 3 so far, and I have a 4th coming out. And I like checking the rankings for the pieces, like right after they drop, a week in, 2 weeks in, a month in, right? And I like checking them in particular because I purposefully don't do any SEO research on them, right? I research the subject matter, but I don't actually check the SERP at all. I don't check the keywords. I don't plug it into any tool on purpose, right? I
But
don't do
I
that.
don't think that should be the goal, right? The goal is to
And
reach the audience of Search Engine Land.
exactly. And the reason why I have not been doing that was as an experiment, right? I wanted to see Search Engine Land already has everything in the background set up, right, for SEO. They already have good domain authority. If whether domain authority works or not, they have a good backlink profile. They rank decently well.
Yep.
So you can assume that articles are ranking on their own merit, right? There's no penalty. But will it rank if I didn't do any of the standard practices, if I didn't pay any attention? All I'm paying attention to is the audience. And they rank really well. Like my most recent one was about fan driven marketing. Within a day, it was ranking with a snippet for fan marketing strategy, right? And
Yep.
it's ranking for a bunch of other ones, right? We overtook basically every other fan marketing keyword: fan engagement, fan marketing, fan content, how to create super fans, how to make people love your brand. Like everything's ranking in that on the top page, most of it with snippets or first or second. No SEO research at all. I just knew the audience.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, right? It's common sense often, right? And you have to optimize things like a little bit on the technical end, right? Make sure your heading is something people can understand. The meta description is actually useful, right?
Yep.
If you have an image, have alt text, have a caption, make sure your headings make sense, but that's kind of it. As long as you know your audience, Google picks up on it. And
Yeah,
it ranks really well.
I agree. But then
Yeah.
you know your audience, you can look inside of their heads. But what do you do then? How do you create content or use these super fans of companies to do marketing?
Yeah. So, this is kind of 2 separate answers. Would you like me to focus on how we create content based on the understanding or the superfan bit? They're related,
Well,
but
I want to know both, to be honest. So we can we cover both or not?
yeah, we can cover both. I'll start with what we usually do with the content because actually it will feed into the other one.
All right.
One of the steps to our fan driven marketing process is make compelling content. So, let's talk about what that means. I often think of content as a beacon, right? A lighthouse almost. In dark ocean, you have a lighthouse and it's, spreading all that light across the waters, right? And it's hoping to attract people who are the right kinds of people who might be passing by and who might see that light and might come to you, right? And the point of it is to attract the right kinds of people in the right kinds of ways, right? You want to be attracting the people you want to come to your lighthouse, right? To your island.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that they actually see the beacon, right? That it's facing the right way, that it's a beacon they want to go to and it doesn't look creepy or
But
something.
sometimes I think it's a beacon in Las Vegas with a lot of lights,
Yeah.
and everybody wants you to go to their light.
Exactly. And also, they often try to make it be just the biggest, most spread out light. And what they don't realize then is if you just see the whole sky is lit up with light pollution, you don't know where that lighthouse is. You don't know where to go.
Yeah.
Right? So it should be targeted, is what I'm trying to get at with that metaphor, right? It should be targeted. A lot of the goal for it is to bring in the right kinds of people that you actually want to be looking at your website. And that means you want to talk to them the way that they want to be talked to in many ways, right? Or they need to be talked to. Something that we often start with is we get this understanding of the audience. And one of the things we look for is what are the questions that they keep asking that nobody is talking about, right? You often see this, especially on forums or Reddit, or even if you see them talking on social media. You see people saying things like, yeah, this is something that like everybody knows, or this is something I've been wondering a lot, and not a single company's talking about this, right? You literally see people say that word for word, or you see them say things like, yeah, this company put out this piece of content, or they say this about that concept, but everyone knows that's not true. That's just marketing fluff. That's what everybody says, right?
Yeah.
And we look for those moments because we want to find what are these sort of common truths that the experts often already know, but nobody's putting it out because all the brands have agreed to copy each other and they're saying something else that they think is marketing appropriate or what people want to hear, right? And whenever you do something like that, you become like a trusted friend, right? Or you become that one person that a lot of us probably have met at some context or another, right? You join a new job and there's the one coworker that shows you the ropes, not for training, not officially, but they're the person that like sits next to you at lunch break and they will tell you, okay, you can't trust this person. And our boss, he will say he actually wants that, but actually what you really need to do is that and watch out for this, right? Like kind of gives you that lay of the land that you can't get in the official training document. And we often try to make our clients put out content that makes them serve as that trusted friend, right? Telling
Yeah.
you, look, this is how it actually is.
But I'm thinking about it. Then I think it is interesting for the Dutch market because also the content can be in another language, but I think we can still use the insights in a lot of cases.
Yep, and we've actually looked at like content in other languages before. I often just use the Google Translate button. It's good enough for the ideas, not for the wording.
Yeah.
And I speak a couple of languages myself, so I do look at content in those other languages too. And it does work, right? And especially, it's even easier if that content doesn't exist in the language that you're trying to create it in, but it does in another language. You can just riff off of it, right? You can even cite it. You can say, I saw this on this other site.
Yeah.
I know that the English audience, for example, right, doesn't have it, or the Dutch audience. So here, let me tell you about it and let us add our own insights, right? It's like a cheat code.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm thinking about. So you talked about the keyword data, and a lot of people
yeah,
use that, but it's easy to get the wrong conclusions with keyword
yeah.
data. And then on the other side, a lot of B2B marketers are talking about talking to real people, to your real customers, and of course that's very important. And maybe this is an online version of talking to your real audience. But it's easier to do. You don't have to call someone. Uh,
You don't have to. I mean, it's amazing if you can,
yeah,
right?
I
But
agree. I
you
agree.
don't always have to. You can still find them. A lot of people are pretty public, right?
And you can do
Just go
both, of
looking.
course.
Yeah, ideally, that's what we try to do. Usually with clients, especially if it's a bigger engagement, we try to do both
Yeah.
because that's kind of, we can confirm things, right? So we usually start with the online research. We make a set of hypotheses, essentially, or assumptions. And then we go and we interview people to test them to see were we correct? Was there something we noticed where we didn't know an explanation? Let's see if we can find it. And then once we get that additional data, we go back and do more online research.
Yeah.
So it kind of builds on each other, right? And the two methods work best together. I often think of content and a lot of marketing in general as relationship building at scale, right? And communication at scale.
Yeah.
And a lot of the same principles that work when you're trying to build a relationship with another individual or communicate with somebody, a particular person, they still apply in many, many ways. You just have to think of it more as maybe an email or something that's more asynchronous, right? You're just sending people long messages, but you're writing them out in a way that you hope they will resonate with, right? And a lot of the same principles apply. You need to not be selfish, right? If you're annoying, people will find you annoying and they won't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
If you only talk about yourself, they'll be like, oh my God, she's so full of herself. I don't want to talk to her anymore, right? If you don't ask them any questions or it doesn't seem like you're listening to them, right? They say one thing, you ignore them, they're not going to want to talk to you. If you betray their trust, they're not going to want to talk to you. If you're not even remotely trying to appeal to their interests or speak in their language, it's all the same things, right? And I feel like this frustrates me a lot. And I don't know why this happens. I think so many marketers lose and just leave at the door the second they start doing marketing any understanding of social norms or how to interact with other people. Like, I feel like everyone turns into a sociopath for some reason, right? They act
Yeah,
as
I
if they've
agree.
never seen another human. And it's like, what are you doing?
It's
What do you
strange.
think is going to happen?
And I'm not sure what the reason is for that, to be honest.
I think a lot of it is just people get into work mode and they think about, this is my process. These are all the concepts I'm dealing with. This is business. And they kind of forget
Yeah.
that they're humans on the other side. It's more a matter of not thinking about it that way, because once I say it to people, they usually get it, right? Almost immediately. And they start marketing way better. It's not that difficult to teach somebody, it's just a mindset shift. I also often think with B2B, a metaphor I use is business is just a bunch of humans in the trench coat of a corporation, right? So B2B is essentially just a trench coat of humans talking to another trench coat full of humans, right? So it's human to human. At the end of the day, it's just you're talking to a bunch of humans within an organization and they have professional goals. That's kind of it. They're still human, they
Yeah.
still have feelings.
I like and hate the term human to human. I like
Yeah,
to think that you are talking to real humans and you should treat
yeah.
them like that. But it's not that B2C and B2B are the same. So
No,
it's
not at
not
all.
that we should forget B2B and call it human to human,
No.
I think.
No, and I that's why I use it more as a supporting point than anything, right? Because I think B2B is a very useful label. Maybe it's more professional human to professional human. I don't know, right? Because you are still dealing with professional goals, right? You're dealing with professional stakeholders. You're dealing usually with multiple stakeholders. You're dealing with people who are trying to do better at their job or in their business. Instead of wanting to impress a date, they're trying to impress a boss, right? Instead of trying to make more money to buy a nice car, they're trying to make more money to meet their stakeholder and shareholder goals, right? It is different.
Yeah.
But people fixate on the professional part to the point of forgetting the personal part, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And then the fan
And
part. So
yes.
um, you don't find your own fans in a tool like SparkToro, right? You can create them,
No.
but
You can find them if you already have them. You can get a better sense of them, right? So if your website or your social media account is big enough, right, and you are indexed, you might be able to find what are people already doing that follow you. But often when we start working with clients, they either don't have that much of an audience to begin with, or they do, but their audience is pretty apathetic, right? There are people who follow them, but they don't actually engage with them that much, right? And the way we usually go about it is fundamentally we start by saying, look, every brand can have super fans and every brand can have people that love it, right? I have been working and collaborating with somebody his name is Dr. Ernahuvia. He's a professor at the University of Michigan, and he spent 30 years studying brand love. So basically, how people might feel genuine love for an object, for a product, for an organization.
interesting.
And he's found that any brand can do it, right? It's possible. It's just you have to do the right things and have the right approach. And he used to do it only on the B2C side. And since we've started collaborating, we've realized it's everywhere in B2B as well. So it does apply. There's research behind this decades and decades, right? And the way we built this process out is we have a flywheel. And it starts with one, make compelling content, right? Because you want to have that lighthouse that's attracting people to you.
Yeah.
You want people to be coming in and actually thinking about it. That's also why it has to be compelling. It has to be worthy enough of people to talk about it and engage with it, right? Because step two is find your fans, right? Or find people who are maybe they have the seeds of becoming a fan
And
in
I
them.
think the part about people talking about it can be very hard. For some topics,
Yes.
it's hard to come up with ideas of making content that, yeah, has that consequence. I
Yeah.
think it can be done because when I'm thinking about it, for example, when I go to TikTok, sometimes I use I watch videos of a man who's creating tables with
Yeah.
wood, and I'm not sure why I'm watching it. Maybe I'm a bit of a fan of these kinds
You're
of videos.
reminding me.
Sorry?
You're reminding me of something. I've been meaning to make content about it, but this will be the first time I talk about it. I discovered the most amazing podcast recently, and I sincerely want to try to interview the person that runs it because I think this is a masterclass in B2B content marketing and creating superfans. It's also about woodworking, actually. It's called Shannon's Lumber Industry Update, and it's by Shannon Rogers. And it's on episode 110 now, right? And the description for this podcast is um, so the podcast is all about lumber and your questions about it. Let's dispel some myths and broaden an understanding of this ancient industry and help us all become a little more wood savvy. Woodier. And the episodes are so technical and so like you think this is so mind-numbingly boring. For example, one of them is called Applied Wood Technical Properties. And if you look at it, there's a little like diagram here.
Yeah.
Like that is how it looks. This podcast has thousands of loyal listeners who talk about it, who recommend it. I heard about it in a YouTube video. I don't look up anything with woodworking. I don't do anything with it, but I
Oh,
found it because somebody was raving about it. There's a whole business built off of the back of it. There's tons of comments. People are sharing it. People love it. I've seen people talk about how they started to love woodworking because of it as well.
that's great.
And it's phenomenal. It's not gimmicky, right? It's not trying to trick you or like talk about woodworking by actually talking about something else or like using flashing lights, right? Or sound effects or having fancy guests. It's just a guy that knows about a lot about lumber talking about it, right? But it's working and it's working so well. And fundamentally, I honestly don't think any industry or any subject is too boring, right? Because there are people that love everything, right? There are people
Yeah.
that will tell you everything about every physical property of a Pokemon card, right? Sure, the Pokemon characters are interesting, but these are the people that will tell you these ones are thicker. The ones from this year will have this glow on them and they were printed here. And this is why this is a limited edition, right? They talk about the most boring parts of it, you'd think, but they love it. And the way they talk about it is often interesting. I think one of the reasons this lumber podcast is working is because the person hosting it thinks it's interesting and they're telling you why it's interesting, right? They're giving you that context. They're kind of bringing you along. Like, this is why this is so cool.
But
And they will tell you,
yeah, I
yeah,
agree. But in B2B, we are thinking a lot about, for example, the buyer journey. And I think maybe to
yeah.
accomplish this, you should forget about the buyer journey. And because then it's becoming a little bit commercial again.
Yeah, and I mean, you can have that commercial element of it, right? You can still talk about the buyer journey a bit, but I think about the buyer journey more of how much are you fixating on particular details of your exact solution more than anything, right? So top of funnel is more general field principles, right? Topics that somebody might be interested in a particular profession. Then middle of the funnel is more things like why somebody in this profession might be looking at these kinds of solutions. And then the final one would be why you want this kind of solution or what to do with this exact kind of solution, right?
Yep.
And again, it shouldn't be about your brand most of the time. I don't think it should. But you can talk about it in a way that's still interesting. You can still tell people why it's cool, right? Often when we work with especially founders, so it's an earlier stage client, I love listening to why they started their company or why they designed a product a certain way because they will get all nerdy about it. Their eyes light up, right? Their voice speeds up, their cadence changes. They feel alive, right?
Yep.
And they start telling you, yeah, this is why we built it this way because we were struggling with this or we saw other people struggling with it and everybody in the industry is struggling with it and they don't have to. And this is why our solution would solve all of this, right? And that energy is what's missing, right? If you have bottom of the funnel content that feels like the way those founders talk when you really get them talking,
Yeah, then it can be great.
exactly. Right?
But a lot
It's
of
still
marketers
passion.
can't do that. It's hard for
Yeah.
marketers in a lot of cases.
It is, and I'm not denying that a lot of this is hard. I mean, that's also why it's effective, right? The hard stuff is
Yeah.
often the most effective.
It's good that it's not too easy. That's I agree with that.
Yeah, and it's also worth it, right? We often talk to clients about how they're going to get less content with us than they would with somebody else. And we explain why that's still a worthwhile endeavor, right? Because we believe that it's better to have 2 pieces or something on your blog that do all of this than 20 that don't do any of it, right? That are mediocre, that are cookie cutter, that sound like everything else.
Yeah.
And it does perform better.
And I think you are a fan of one company as well, right? I think you are a
Yeah.
SparkToro fan.
I am a SparkToro super fan. In fact, I
Yeah.
have a whole talk I've done that's about my love story with SparkToro.
I think
Yeah.
Rand is very happy with you, right?
Yeah, he's great. He's referred a bunch of business to us. We just started with another client that he referred to us. In fact, Rand is the only referral source we have that has had 100% closing rate,
That's great.
which has been pretty cool. I've been thinking, how do I get like 5 more Rands? Because then I can just run my agency off of that. But, that's a difficult question.
Indeed. But okay, we
Yeah.
were at the point of
Yes.
creating this very good content, and then what's
Yes.
the next step?
Yes. So step one, create compelling content, which is hard, and I'm glad we, focused on that for a second. Step two is once people are compelled and they start talking to you and talking about you, find them. And it sounds like a silly step, but so many companies don't do that. We ask them, has anybody talked about your content or about your company? And like, we don't know. Like we hear people coming in on our sales calls, and that's kind of it. It's like, okay, we want transcripts of those sales calls to see what they're saying. And then have you just looked it up online? And they haven't. They often haven't. Like you just put in your company name into LinkedIn and things come up most of the time, right? Or you look for article names or something, right? And people start talking about it. They start showing up. And once they do, listen, pay attention, see what are they like. Then step three is start interacting with them, right? So respond to a comment, maybe like a post, right? Maybe say thank you for sharing. Even in a customer support email, if they mention something, right, that's more marketing related or about their experience with the product, acknowledge that. Don't just talk about the ticket that you're helping them solve. Actually, make them feel heard and seen and like
Yeah.
you're actually there paying attention. Because if people feel like they're talking to a wall, they're not going to continue talking to you for long, right? So the next step is kind of this is where you turn them from customers into actual fans, right? And this is where love often starts, is help them, right? And when you're dealing with B2B in particular, all of your customers are businesses. They have the same needs as you in many ways. So one of the best ways to help them, besides your product, is to promote them a little bit, right? Share your platform, share the things that you can do to also help them market themselves and also get more sales, right?
Yep.
So we often recommend that you might want to even collaborate with them potentially. You might want to share something they've done if you have a newsletter or a mailing list. And this is what SparkToro did really well with me, actually, and why I became such a big fan. When I would do something that they would notice, right, they have put it in their newsletter, right? And then suddenly this little thing I put together is being blasted to their tens of thousands of subscribers. And I would see that. I would see a huge impact from that. People would come and follow me. People would tell me that's how they found me. People would go to my website and I would see the referral source. Do you really think I'm less likely to like SparkToro after they do something like that for me? I immediately think, oh my God, wow, look at what they've done for me. I want to do something else for them, right? It's reciprocity. You
Yep.
do things for each other, essentially. And at that point, it's more even. It's bidirectional communication, is what I would say.
Yeah. So the
You're talking to your
relation.
fans, they're talking to you.
Yeah. You
Eh,
earlier you mentioned building relationships at scale, and
exactly.
yeah.
And if somebody's doing favors for you all the time and you're not doing anything for them, they will probably stop doing favors for you, right? Or they're doing it out of obligation, but it's going to be a tense relationship. It's not going to build on each other. Versus whenever you bring somebody a little gift and they bring you something, or you spend time with them and they spend time with you want to do more for them. You want to spend more time with them. You feel more attachment to them, right? And that's what we're trying to do here.
And
So then
oh,
the
sorry.
final step, yeah, just to conclude, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The final step on the flywheel is once you've been listening and talking to them for a while, you're going to get a lot of feedback on your product, on your solution, and on your content and on your marketing. You don't have to listen to all of it, just like if somebody gives you advice in person. Listen, say thank you. You don't have to apply everything, but some of it will probably be good. This is your literal target audience, your literal ideal customers, your fans telling you what they want to see. You have customer research right there in front of you, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to go out and look for them as hard anymore. They're right there. They're telling you what they want. So you apply it. And once you've applied it, you can make content about that. Or you make content based on the idea. You might even mention that. You might make content with them. So it becomes more compelling because it was made with the understanding of your ideal audience. And the flywheel spins.
I like it.
Yeah.
And but how do you do it? Because let's say that you are helping a B2B company with this. Who should do it inside of that company? Is it the CEO or sales or marketing or all of them?
Well, it depends, right? It depends on the size of the company. It depends on what they're doing. Ideally, I think as all marketing, it should work kind of cross functionally, right? Marketing would usually take ownership of that, and that's usually what we do. If we work with a really early stage company, we're often working with the founders, but most of the time we work with their marketing team. It might be their SEO team, it might be their content team. Sometimes it's even been their community engagement team. But that's who takes ownership of the program, right? And the particular channel for it. But we involve everybody else. We involve sales. We talk to product and engineering. We talk to customer success, right? We make sure that everybody knows about it and often are kind of working alongside, right? Because everybody knows something about the customer. People are often engaging with the customer in different ways or with the audience. And we want to put all of that together and make sure that all of the insights are together, make sure the communication's effective, right? And that everybody kind of knows what relationships they're building. And ideally, you also involve the founders to whatever extent you can, right? They can be busy, or the executives in general. We try to get them in for some interviews, usually to make some content from their name. We see what appearances they're doing, ideally, if they're talking at conferences, if they're going on podcasts and shows, if they're going talking to some network. We want to understand that too, right?
Yep.
So it's ideally just kind of working across the whole organization and everybody's sort of helping each other, and every action that everybody's taking builds into this process. But one team usually owns it, and because we're marketers, it's often marketing.
Yeah. And which percentage of the companies that you talk to already have fans?
Um, it's interesting. Sometimes they think they don't, but they do, and that's the most fun one. But I would say it's maybe at this point it's between 40 and 50%, but that's partially because that's the kind of companies we're attracting.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be the case. It used to be almost nobody had them. But now we have people coming in who say, we have fans, but we don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
Right. And then there are companies that didn't know that they had fans, or they kind of knew, but they didn't know how vocal they'd be. This is somebody we haven't worked with yet, but we're trying to figure out if maybe we might. And somebody I've been talking to a lot. Active Campaign, right? So they're a pretty big organization. They never used to engage their fans in any way except the typical case study, testimonial, referral program. They had like vetted consultants. But after talking to me and reading one of my articles, one of their marketing people, Casey Hill, ran a little program that he's still doing, where he basically encouraged customers to post on LinkedIn about their experience with Active Campaign. And it was extremely non-structured. He just wanted to see what would happen. So he said, if you like us, just tell us why you like us, and please tag me, tag the company. I'll be looking, right? I
Yep.
just want to hear who likes us and why. It poured in, right? He's talked to me about it. Like immediately, there were, I think I was going up to 14 a day sometimes, right? Posts on LinkedIn
That's great.
from customers. And I've seen those posts. I've been tracking them because I've been curious. They're all so different. They're all so personal. There are pictures on a bunch of them, personal stories. They're talking about Active Campaign with so much love, right? And Casey's sitting there going, oh, wow, right? What do we do with this now? Like, there's so much we can do. Like, a whole world of possibilities opens up when you just try.
And I also think that a lot of different people have different opinions about what a fan is. And I think a lot of people think it's hard to say that they have fans. It sounds a bit strange, maybe, to say it of yourself. But yeah, it also depends on the definition that you use of what a fan is.
And you can use different definitions for different campaigns, actually, right? You can have campaigns that are just anybody that's very vocal about how much they like our product or service, right? You can have another campaign that's extremely intensive and includes putting people into a separate program. And that might be, we want to find people who love us, right?
Yep.
Who have been dedicated to us, who have tied our businesses with us, right? It changes. And it doesn't mean that you should only work with one kind of fan either. I purposefully keep it vague when I talk about the flywheel or fan-driven marketing in general, because all of these kinds of fans can, first of all, morph into each other, right? People can get more involved with your brand over time, but also all of them are useful just for different things.
Yeah. And for example, when I look at my podcast, I'm starting a company right now. And I have this podcast for more than 1.5 years. I don't have fans, but I do have people who like my podcast because they tell me that. And I can consider them as a fan, treat them like that, and build a
Yeah.
relationship. And sometimes I do that. I even invited some people to my podcast from who I know they are always listening and they like it.
There you go. That's exactly it. That's fan-driven marketing. Yeah, you're basically doing some of it already, right? So you can build a whole system around it. Yeah. A lot of people and a lot of companies are doing some of it. They're just not really realizing what they're doing, and they're not realizing how to build on it or how to make it systematic or repeatable or more effective. I would call somebody like that a fan, right? If they listen to most of your episodes or if they tell you how much they like it, that's a fan, right? I have a newsletter, and pretty early on, I think from the third post that I made, I had people emailing me saying I loved it, right? And it was still the first time that they had read it, but they were so vocal about it that I was like, okay, I'll consider these people fans. And I started treating them that way. I started thanking them for being a fan. I would wait for their comment and I'd ask, hey, it's so nice to see you again, right? I would email them again. I put a bunch of them on the About page with quotes, right? I would talk about how happy I am that they like the newsletter. And now they call themselves my fans, right? That's the funny thing.
That's
You can
great.
start using it first, and as long as you're genuine about it and sincere and you're actually helpful, they will honestly embrace the label.
Yeah. Can you share something about your own marketing approach?
Yeah, it's very fan driven and it's very organic, right? So we are very people focused, I would say, in everything that we do. I talk to people a lot. So my audience research is both I do things online constantly. I look at SparkToro, right? I look things up. I see what people are doing. See what people in my field are doing all the time as well. But I also get on the phone with people constantly. I do 4 to 5 networking calls every week. I also make sure to message people constantly. I just see what they're up to, right? I just connect with people who are my ideal audience or who are adjacent to it. And I just want to know, what are they thinking about? What are they struggling with, right? Can I help? Can I just build a relationship with them? And that kind of understanding, right? If I understand 10 people really well, I can make content for them that appeals to hundreds, right?
Yep.
And I often write my newsletters to specific people in my head. I often write my search engine land articles. I think of 1 or 2 people that I'm writing this for. And I just know them so well that it's easy, right? It's easy to do that. I'm thinking, what would appeal to them? And it's the same thing as in fiction. The more specific you are, the more generally applicable it ends up being often.
Have we missed anything important?
Hmm.
I think you are doing more things in your own marketing, right? I saw some
Yeah,
videos on your LinkedIn and
Yeah, I would also say just don't force things, right? It's again, think about the same way as you would try to talk to people one on one or in a normal social setting, right? When you're doing marketing. If you force it and if it's clear that you're talking in a way that you wouldn't normally talk, that you're really unnatural, that you're really stiff, you might have a script or something,
Yep.
people will think it's weird, right? Imagine coming to a dinner party and you have a whole script prepared and you're reading off of it and you're trying to stick to it as much as possible. You have your sales pitch,
It's
right?
hard. Yeah.
People are going to be like, something's off, right? I'm going to walk over there. I'm going to change my seat. I suddenly have to go to the bathroom, right? So just remember that, right? And it doesn't mean you can't try new things. A lot of people are unnatural on camera. Practice, right? Start being more natural, but also don't feel like you have to have a camera voice, right? Don't feel like you have to sound like the other person you've seen on camera. Be yourself, right? And be yourself as the brand, right? What is your brand DNA? What is your brand personality? And not on a document. What is it actually, right? What is your product like? What is your team like? What are you like with customers when you actually talk to them? And that's what you should exude in your marketing.
Great. I have
Yeah.
one last question.
Mhm.
If you could go back in time 10 years, what advice would you give yourself?
Don't believe everybody that's telling you that you can never make money with a writing degree or by writing.
Are people saying that?
Oh, yeah. I was told constantly, even as I was about to graduate. I'm a senior in college. I took a writing and literature degree, and my professors are telling me day in, day out, you're not going to make any money with these skills, not going to make any money with this degree. The only ways to make money are you become a professor, also off the field, or you somehow manage to make it as a novelist or like a journalist, which is nearly impossible. It's like winning the lottery at this point. And there's nothing else. Everything else you would do, they will look at your degree as, ugh, right? It doesn't matter. And nobody's going to care about your actual skills. And that's not true.
Nope.
Everything I learned in college, everything I did in my writing and literature degree is what my career's built on. And I've met so many other marketers and content people with writing degrees, with literature degrees, people who have been reading and writing their entire lives. So Not true. There's a
Yeah.
whole field out there.
Sometimes I wish I had a little bit of a copywriter background because it's a great skill to have as a marketer.
It is, right? And I feel like marketing is one of those fields that it becomes what you make of it in many ways. There's so many specializations, there's so many functions that whatever background you already have, whatever skills, whatever aptitude you have, you can usually find a place for yourself. It's just you have to look for it that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the nice conversation. Where can
Yeah,
people
thank you.
find or follow you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. I am Mariya Delano over there. They can find me on Mastodon as well. I'm on Hachyderm, so HACHYDERM.io/ Mariya Delano. They can follow my newsletter, admdnewsletter.com. It stands for Attention Deficit Marketing Disorder. Or on my agency website, which is Kalyna Marketing, KALYNA marketing.com.
I was following you on Threads from Meta for 3
Oh,
days.
yes.
But then I got blocked because I'm from Europe.
Oh, no, right. Yeah, I have not been posting on Threads in ages. I've been getting notifications that people are following me, but I haven't opened it in a while.
But I think I can't see it anymore, but I think it's pretty dead already, right?
It is pretty dead. I hope maybe something might revitalize it, but I'm honestly okay with other things. LinkedIn and Mastodon's enough for me.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Again, thanks a lot.
And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Great.
Thanks for listening to the Inbound Forecast. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app.